Thank you to the organizer, to Mario Mignone, for inviting me. And so I try to propose a kind of evenemential vision of the Mediterranean, because long durates is incompatible with 20 minutes. So I will be more modest about the content with respect to the title of my intervention. So I try to present some complementary aspect with regard to the intervention of Manuel Pénicaud. And so there is a growing body of work which has been done in the last few years concerning religion crossing in the Mediterranean, shared sacred places, and so on. There are anthropologists have been quite involved in this field, but a growing number of historians, geographers are also working on this. And also Karen Berke has edited recently a book on the choreography of the shared sacred places. And so it seems to me that this work is quite crucial in order to have a fresh look at the Mediterranean in a way which is counteracting some narratives which are very powerful, very influential, and we go through starting from Pirene to Huntington and so on, which put the accent on the on divide, on context. And this doesn't mean that we shouldn't deny the strength of the contrast, the clashes which have been important in very frequent in the history of the Mediterranean region, and which are still present. On a more from a more strictly religious point of view concerning the religion, we know that monotheistic religions have got an exclusivist tendency, which is less developed in other world religions. Nevertheless, we know also that there is a thick network of commercial and cultural exchanges which has shaped the history of the Mediterranean. And this also had important implication on the religious experience. And as a matter of fact, religious crossing, contrarily to a quite received wisdom, is not so exceptional in Mediterranean countries in the history and in the present. But we risk to be blind. We risk to not perceive this phenomenon if we look at only to the institutional core of religions, to their dogmatic aspect, but we can discover a very unexpected landscape if we move toward the lived experience of people, toward ordinary practices. And we can see that very often they could deviate from the canons of institutionalized religions, and we can see that forms of worship can overlap. And this is not only a matter of exceptional experience of people, of intellectuals, of mystics, of people who are a very peculiar experience, but it is also linked, and especially linked, to the experience of ordinary people, to the ordinary life of people. And this counteract the received wisdom concerning the monotheism in the Mediterranean region. And the work which has been done has shown that we can have hundreds, even thousands of examples similar to this one that Manuel Pénicaud showed to us concerning the house of the Virgin Mary in Ephesus. And so it's possible, and we are trying also with Karen to construct maps of the occurrence of this, and Karen is at Columbia University is also working on this, and of the occurrences of these phenomena in the past and the present. And an important reference is that of Frederick Hasluck, a great archaeologist and a historian, but also ethnographer, who lived between the end of 19th century and the beginning of 20th century, and who was kind of a pioneer in exploring this kind of phenomena, and wrote an important book on Christianity and Islam under the Sultan in the Ottoman Empire, and he could collect materials concerning hundreds of examples in this concerning mainly the 19th century. We know that a peculiar situation of the Mediterranean, and this has been recalled by some interventions this morning, is the close cohabitation of people of different religions. And this is a phenomenon which is present for along the centuries. And this close cohabitation can generate also the separation, the divide, the hostility, and or the indifference. We have a kind of a powerful expression of this tendency in the Merchant of Venice by Shakespeare, when the Jew Shylock says to a Christian man, I quote, "I will buy with you, sell with you, talk with you, walk with you, and so following, but I will not eat with you, drink with you, nor pray with you." And so according to this vision, even a narrow physical proximity, so typical of several sectors of the Mediterranean in the long run, do not involve forms of commensality and of devotional mixing. Yet this is only a part of the reality, and in fact we know that devotional mixing in reality were quite present at different moments. And to counteract this vision by Shylock, this Shylock paradigm, I can give you an example which is still related with Venice, but also with Istanbul. And it is situated in the middle of 17th century, so some more 50 years after Shakespeare play, and it's the father Robert de Dreux, who was then based in Istanbul as chaplain of the French ambassador, and he decided to visit the island of the Aegean Sea. He boarded on a Greek ship, and he was under the protection of another passenger who was a Turkish soldier who was traveling to Chios. And they communicated in Italian, because the Turkish soldier had learned Italian during his captivity in Venice. we know well the war between the hostility between Istanbul and between Ottoman Empire and Venice, and at the moment the boat was surprised by a storm, and there was an extreme danger, and everybody was crying, and the Turkish soldier, according to the what the father, the Dreux, has written, on this occasion, the Turkish soldier asked for the aid of the Santissima Madonna, the Blessed Virgin, according to his word. And because he heard when he was prisoner of war in Venice that her intercession is very favorable. So this devotion of the Virgin Mary, which is present now in Ephesus and also in other parts of Turkey, has quite a long history. And apparently these prayers were effective, and so they survived to the storm, and they can continue their travel together. And I move now to another example, which is related to some topics, some other intervention here, is the example of Lampedusa, which is still linked to the Virgin Mary. And this example shows forms of contacts of region overlap on the margins of the inhabited land. This small island between Sicily and Tunisia during the early modern period was almost deserted, and the only human presence was, in some periods at least, that of a Christian hermit who kept a small chapel dedicated to the Virgin, together with the tomb of a Muslim saint. So it was there was a double cult, the chapel of the Virgin Mary and the tomb of a Muslim saint. And Turkish and European sailors stopped on the island for water, and they visited the shrine and left offerings. So this is the island of Lampedusa, and here is the image of the most ancient image of the Virgin of Lampedusa. It's beginning of 17th century and end of 15th, beginning of 17th century, and it is the same figure like the Madonna di Trapani, and so it was a protector of sailors, and there is a large amount of travel narratives which are detailing the situation between the 16th century and the 19th century. And so sailors left clothes, cordage, biscuits, money, and as Dudley North, who visited Lampedusa in the second half of the 17th century, he wrote that it is lawful for all to come here to serve their occasions with what they find and need, but they must be sure to leave in value somewhat else that may be equally needful on other occasions, be it money or goods. And and naufragees could use these staffs in order to survive, waiting for a ship with which they could travel. And so there are several descriptions of this situation, and in fact this is an ex voto in which there was a slave who could, according to a legend, who could escape from Lampedusa with the miraculous help of the Virgin Mary, using her image as a veil. And so Lampedusa as an important place also in European literature, and we can find echoes of this particular situation of Lampedusa, of this no man's land between Christian and Muslim countries. For instance, in the Orlando Furioso of Ariosto, Lampedusa is powerfully present. There is a duel between 3 Christian knights and 3 Muslim knights, and according to some interpretations, even the island of Shakespeare's Tempest, with all its enchantments, would have been inspired by the tradition of Lampedusa. And there are also references to Lampedusa, for instance, by Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who wrote a book which was an accomplished Émile et Sophie, okay, and even Diderot, Denis Diderot mentioned, and both Rousseau and Diderot were aware of this double cult in Lampedusa, and in the Enlightenment milieu of Paris, Lampedusa was used to hint to tolerance and to between religions, and so this interfight. Also, the case of Lampedusa is not exceptional. There are other occurrences, similar occurrences, and so it was a place of in which religious presence was shared with immunity. And this is the situation of the chapel. The place still exists. Here you have some images, and even the memory of this tradition of hospitality linked to the Virgin Mary is still present in Lampedusa, and it is here you have some contemporary objects that we have shown in the exhibition in Marseille that we have curated with Manuel Penicot. And these are objects which are done with the rest of the ships of the migrants, and they have been constructed, been done for the visit of the Pope Francis, and so he saw the Mass with this using these sacred objects. But now I move 4 minutes, briefly to another island and to another saint figure. The island is Buyukada, which is in front of Istanbul, and the saint is Saint George. Saint George is another figure similar to the Virgin Mary, which who has made possible several religious crossing between Muslim and Christians, and he was identified with a Quranic figure like Khidr, and with a Muslim figure. And in this island there is a Greek Orthodox monastery, and there is a huge pilgrimage at 2 moments of the year. The main pilgrimage is on April, on St. George Day, 23 of April, and there are dozens of thousands of pilgrims who come in this day to venerate the image, the icon of St. George, and the majority are Muslims. And for instance, in this photograph you can see a Muslim woman who is praying inside the chapel of the monastery, and there is a lot of practices, ritual practices inside the monastery, outside the monastery. Here you can see the vows which are written on small papers and put on the trees. And I will show you now.
Aslında bir nevi insanın kendini dinlemesi gibi bir şey oldu buraya çıkış. Yani hani o konuşmam olayı benim fikrimce insanın kendini dinlemesi için bir süreç. Ve aslında bence bazen insanların kendini dinlemesi için böyle tuhaf şeyler yapması gerekiyor diye düşünüyorum.
Only the feast of St. George, we have an average of 70,000 in one day. That special day is beyond imagination. And you know, sometimes the people have to wait 2 or 3 hours. It's not something simple to just come and enter the Church of St. George. Most of the people that come here are not Christians. They light candle, and when they find themselves in the church, they didn't plan to come and pray here, but they do kind of pray or wish something. And we hear things that sometimes are very simple, like may God help my children to pass the exams at the university, until very serious things like to heal my child, which has cancer, or sometimes children ask for their parents to quit drinking or to come together because they are separated. They certainly know where they go, but it's a Christian church and it's a place of God. That's what they know. Many of them know also, as well, that it is a Church of St. George. In the church, everything is shared. There's nothing especially for one person. Everything is shared.
Orada bilmiyorum, ilk defa girdim, işte gene el açıp Allah'a dua ederek çıktım. Yani her şeyi Allah'tan yani istiyoruz gene de. Düşündük biz gelirken, çünkü Hristiyanlar da camilerimizi biliyorsunuz ziyaret ediyorlar. Hani biz de niye dedik hani gelmeyelim, ziyaret etmeyelim. Bu düşünceyle geldik. Yok.
Karşıların istediğin dileği burada.
Mesela
Örnek veriyorum.
ev yapılmış,
Evet.
bebek, bilmem ne.
Okul.
Okay. Thank you.